watched The Exorcist Part 3.
Ooh.
The one with the Gemini killer.
Yes.
Wildly different than, like, the first one.
Almost entirely unrelated.
It's totally unrelated. I was laughing throughout that whole movie. It's very absurdist, kind of almost like David Lynch humor at times.
I love that one. I watched that in a bar last year. My favorite hot dog bar. Drinking Bloody Marys. It's just one of my favorites. Fun note-ish about that film ties into Danny Rolling, American serial killer, known as the Gainesville Ripper, who the film franchise Scream is based off of, so double dipping back into horror movies.
Oh, there you go.
But anyways, he basically, like, sort of based his, like, you know, religious delusions, or what he claimed they were, loosely off the plot of The Exorcist 3. You know,
interesting.
I mean, yeah, even like adopting the Gemini name for himself. Yeah.
Come on, be original.
Yeah, he sucks.
You're gonna be a serial killer, like, think of some really exciting way, like I only take their left testicle or something.
Oh, well, he actually did all kinds of fucked up shit like that. He like cutting boobs off. That was his big thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, just general corpse mutilation stuff. And again, Scream is based off of him, which is... I love the Scream series, you know. It's a little campy, but it's like... It's just everything right about the 90s. So,
yeah, no, it's at least... Especially the first one has a special place in my heart.
Same. And of course, the scary movies, which I don't really watch anymore. I just feel like I've seen 1 through 3 so many times, and that was the peak scary movie era.
Yeah, those were fun. Then they kind of outwore their welcome.
Agreed.
Anyway, this is Far Out Flicks. I'm Braden.
And I'm Andrew.
And thank you for joining us today. We're talking about Phantasm. Fuck, I loved this movie.
It was a very good time. I'd never seen it. It's been on the list for forever. It regularly makes all sorts of horror lists that I tune into and check on. But it just had never gotten around to it, and I'm glad that we did.
I have no idea how I missed this one. Well, I kind of do now, because most of the ones that were released, like, while I was a conscious human being, old enough to remember, just went straight to DVD.
Indeed.
So you don't get, like, the trailers like you see for Hellraiser and Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. You were just, you know, barraged with those all through childhood or whatever, and didn't really hear much about Phantasm.
The film's kind of fringe, too, right? Like, I mean, it's got a huge cult following, and I absolutely loved it. But I could see it being something like my dad watched or whatever, and, you know, he would have just been like, that was pretty fucking weird. Like, like what did I just watch? You know, it's not as concrete as a lot. I mean, you know, horror itself is pretty loose with things, but, you know, in terms of the dreamlike sequencing of the film, that was like some pretty, like, heady shit, you know?
For sure. I would say that this is an early example of, like, a David Lynch type film where it's more art house. There's that vibe as well.
Indeed, a lot of people draw comparisons towards, like, Alejandro Jodorowsky's work. So, like, of the fabled, never to be released, his interpretation of Dune, or what could have been. I
would say it makes more sense than Jodorowsky's.
Or sure.
This has more of, like, a narrative. I get that there's those vibes are there.
I guess I'm just saying he's like the Mac Daddy of that fucking weird.
Oh, he is. Him and David Lynch. I'm gonna say David Lynch is in there in the running.
Yeah. He made it an art. I mean, not that it wasn't an art form to begin with, but he honed the craft, I would say. He also was able to keep making films, so he was doing something right.
Sure. But yes, I would imagine that many of our listeners probably missed this one as well, just because it's not as much of a part of that zeitgeist, but it has a very enthusiastic following, and it is a massive cult hit, and it spawned 5 films and a whole mythology, and there are people who are obsessed with this.
Now, with me being one of them.
Same. And when I felt so happy to have discovered this week. And I was like, holy shit. I wish I had seen this when I was like 13 or 14 or 15.
And as you were saying earlier, like this, it's almost like this film is meant for that age bracket. You know, I mean, I don't know what that says about us being in our mid-30s and being so immediately enamored with it. But
it hits those nostalgia buttons. And I mean, it's from kind of the main protagonist is like a 13-year-old kid, basically. And it kind of has like this childlike innocence about a lot of it, you know?
Yeah, one of the critical like responses to this film is that, or interpretations I should say, is that it is representative of death from an adolescent's perspective. Which I thought about it and like, I agree. I think that that's actually pretty spot on.
It's pretty spot on. And it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's like, it's subtle. It's not so on the nose, but like that subtext is there, you know, intentionally.
But it's not like a total bummer either. Like it's a pretty fun film. I mean, it's loaded with frights. Like, you know, one of the objectives was to have a scare every 5 minutes, which I think it delivers on. But the film is also, like, its genre is science fantasy horror. So it's like this weird fusion of all of my favorite nerd genres.
There's a lot to unpack here. There is a lot to unpack here. And it gets weird. And this movie rules. And if you haven't seen Phantasm, just go watch it. I watched it on Peacock, and it's free on there.
And it's free on Shudder as well.
Well, you have to pay for Shudder, right? On Peacock, I just have the app and it's just free. I don't even subscribe. I had to watch like 160 seconds of ads, and then there was not an ad throughout the entire film. So they're all up front.
But if you have Shudder, it's free without ads.
Loved it though. I think the other ones are on there. Can't wait to watch them.
Yeah, the rest of my Halloween season is going to have these peppered in.
So, let's get into this movie.
Diving on in.
So, rolling it back a little. Phantasm is a 1979 film written, directed, and filmed by Don Coscarelli. And Don Coscarelli is kind of an interesting guy. I guess he was born in Libya and knew he wanted to be a filmmaker early on. I think at the time he was the youngest filmmaker to have his film distributed by a major studio when he was 19. Now that wasn't this film because Phantasm was his third film.
Pretty impressive. I mean, I think like as time's gone on, we've had a few other breakout young directors, but definitely unheard of at the time.
I mean, that's pretty young. And I really want to see that film. The name of it escapes me at the moment, but apparently it's quite good. Not a horror movie.
He's done a bunch of other horror films after this one. One that stood out to me in looking at the filmography was John Dies at the End, which is one of my favorite neo-horror novels.
Okay.
The film was just okay.
I haven't seen it, but I actually feel like I heard that one was good.
I mean, it's still fun. I like the book a lot more, but that's often the case, you know.
A lot of the actors in Phantasm actually worked with Don Coscarelli on his first few films, and I think that might even be how he hooked up with Reggie Bannister, who plays Reggie in the film. Who's kind of like the friend of the two brothers, the comic relief character with the best ponytail I've ever seen in my life. Yeah,
the horseshoe bald man ponytail that is good friends with two young adolescents.
But and he's the ice cream man.
Yeah.
He drives an ice cream truck. But there's something about that ponytail and like the way he pulls it off, you know.
Reggie seems like a cool guy.
And apparently in the later films he becomes basically like the main character.
Cool.
Which I haven't seen them, but I looked into it a little bit. But yeah, he takes on more of a role. So anyway, Reggie Bannister, who his character's also Reggie, so that's easy. He approached Don Coscarelli with an idea they wanted to do an adaptation of Ray Bradbury's novel, Something Wicked Comes This Way. And then when they saw that they couldn't get the rights. So they were looking for a different theme, something similar to make, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coscarelli had a dream in his late teenage years of running through like these white labyrinth hallways, being chased by a metal sphere with like a needle poking out of it, which is essentially, you know, that's one of the most iconic things from this film is this like weird metal ball that kills people.
I think that's like a common archetype of nightmare too. Like I relate to that. I've had dreams where, for me, it was zombies like in a giant mansion.
Sure. Running away from something, hiding.
Yeah, it was like 28 Days Later zombies, though. You know,
the fast ones.
Yeah.
The worst kind to get.
The worst kind to get.
So actually, Don Coscarelli rented a cabin totally isolated in the woods for a few weeks and wrote the entire script by himself in isolation, which that pretty good method. I like that.
Yeah, I've fantasized about doing that, you know.
Like, yeah, I'm Henry David Thoreau and I'm living off the land now. Look at me, Ma. I'm a frontiersman.
I just know I would never get anything done. I would just procrastinate alone in the cabin.
You'd just look at your one porno mag you brought.
Yep.
For hours.
Hours.
Correct. Yeah, I mean that would be intense. Especially like in today's day and age where like we're so used to technology and everything. But I mean that's the way to get it done, you know.
It is
no distractions. But yeah, the whole idea was, you know, first that flying silver ball with the needle dream. And then the other idea was something about a funeral parlor. He points out in some of the DVD commentary, I believe, that, yeah, funeral parlors are a little bit mysterious. It's like one part of our culture that we kind of don't look at quite directly, you know? And there are weird rituals happening where we're embalming these bodies and just...
It's all behind closed doors.
It's a little weird. It's kind of like a weird thing we turn our blind eye to, even though it's like on the surface, it is odd. It's an odd ritual.
I think it's because people in Western cultures don't like to think about death. So it's like, you know, we're creating that separation, that barrier.
And I mean, and that's what this whole film is about, kind of. And I mean, arguably, the antagonist of this film is like a living manifestation of the concept of death and existential angst.
Yeah, they did a good job there. The tall man, of whom he is speaking, is I mean, he just looks kind of like a mortician, right? Like, I mean, he is a mortician, but it's like exactly what I think of when I think of creepy mortician.
Agree. He looks serious, but I could also imagine that same guy being very nice, you know? Nice mortician. He's weird looking, though. He looks like he hangs out with dead bodies.
That is what a mortician does.
It turns himself into a woman and tries to seduce boys in the graveyard.
On a macabre note, when they used an actual mortuary for the set for some of this, and they had, you know, a mortician present to make sure nothing was damaged or anything like that. And he would watch them film. And one evening, late in the night when they were filming, like the bell rang upstairs, and he's like, "Oh, I got another one." And went up, and yeah, that's macabre little mortician story associated with the film.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, mortician's a weird job. I mean, I can't think of another job where you're more facing the existential reality of your own death every single day.
That's literally the entire premise to 6 Feet Under.
The TV show?
Yes, which is quite good.
Yeah, I've watched them all. It's been a while.
Same. It's one of those OG HBO binge-worthy shows.
Well, yeah, so this film, we'll just go ahead and say it. It's pretty low budget. It's art house. This is a passion project from beginning to end of Coscarelli, and really his whole family got involved. All of his family and all of his, that's a leader, honestly. Like, he just got, like, his whole community of people to, like, rally behind this absurd, like, mission from God he had to just make this weird movie.
Which he did on a budget of $300,000, and it brought home, in the box office, internationally, $22 million.
That's a lot.
That's the kind of story I hear that's just like, man, I wish I was a filmmaker at that time. You know, oh yeah. But 300,000 was a lot more back then than it is now. That's true.
That's probably closer to $1 million.
But 22 million was a lot more than it is now. So
well, the funding,
huge success.
So to raise funds for this film, most of it came from his dad, so that must be nice.
Who's a producer.
My dad definitely just rather watch it burn than ever let me have any of it, ever finance any project. Thanks, Dad. You're the reason this podcast isn't huge.
Have you asked? You never know till you ask.
No, I haven't asked, but maybe I should.
I mean, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Check out this absurd business plan for Far Out Flicks. We're going to build a giant Far Out Flicks statue. We're going to have merch. And no real way of recouping your investment.
We're going to have a corporate office somewhere fancy.
So Don Coscarelli's mother, Kate Coscarelli, she designed costumes, she did makeup. Later on, she wrote a novel adaptation of the film.
Of which there are only 500 copies.
Correct. But I mean, it just shows the support of his parents. He roped his whole damn family into this fucking insane. Imagine this was your movie. Like, what would your mom say if, like, you brought her this script and were like, we're gonna make a movie, Mom?
I don't think who knows? Maybe she's getting towards retirement. She might be invigorated by the idea.
She'd be like, this is the best script I've ever read, Andrew. No, you came up with this on your own?
Highly unlikely that would be her response to this script or any horror script. She doesn't care for horror.
Well, his parents were like, this is such a good idea. Here's $300,000.
That's pretty sweet. His mom did so much for the film. She actually is credited 3 times in the credits, 2 times under pseudonyms.
That's fun. That is fun. Yeah, the cast and crew were like all basically their friends. Totally unprofessional. All very amateurish in every regard. He couldn't hire cameramen, so he did it all himself. He kind of, it's kind of like the same. We've told this story before on Far Out Flicks. It's the Evil Dead. It's, it's all of those. Bootstrapped it every step of the way and just made it happen through sheer force of will, basically.
They often didn't have permits for filming. They literally were hooking up extension cables to adjacent properties. I don't know if that means they were stealing power or if they just were like, hey, we'll throw you some bones.
And then it didn't even really get a full release. Like, I'm pretty sure they could only, make so many copies of the film that they actually had to kind of, shop it around state by state. Like, it wasn't a massive United States release all at once. It kind of was a build-up,
Do you know if North Carolina
I do not
displayed
know.
it?
I would imagine so. I mean, it ultimately became kind of a surprise smash hit, So I'd imagine it played probably everywhere.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, just in the United States alone, it made over $10 million,
Again, $300,000 budget.
That's pretty impressive. That's a nice
sweet
return
ROI.
on. Well, I mean, it's kind of. It's a perfect example where, like, this guy's unique, weird, quirky vision, which, say it had big studio backing and funding, he wouldn't have been able to make it this weird and quirky. Like, it may not have been such a smash hit as it is because they would have taken all the charm and idiosyncrasies out of it, you know?
They would have supplanted him with a better director at controlling Val Kilmer.
Well, it's actually kind of. Phantasm 2 apparently had a bigger budget and big studio backing, and they actually did supplant the main character, Mike, who he's the little boy in the first one. They supplanted him in the second one and then changed a bunch of stuff and, you know, interfered, basically.
Yeah.
Which I did. I was pleased to learn that obviously this film's gone on to have a life of its own and 4 sequels. I was pleased to learn that Coscarelli wrote all of these movies, kind of stayed in complete control throughout the franchise. They all feature the same actors. I can't think of another over 40 years, which is a long time. I don't think any of the other ones do that. You don't have Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween. I mean, I guess Halloween Return, they brought it back, but like, Phantasm's pretty fucking consistent.
Yeah, I mean, Robert Englund was like always Freddy.
Isn't there there's a newer Freddy though, right?
Oh, you might be right, but
I'm almost positive he is not Freddy now, but I could be wrong.
Well, he had a good run.
And I mean, that might ultimately be because that's a more popular franchise that's going to go on beyond the lifespan of.
Yeah, this is true. Being Freddy's a young man's game.
That's, but Phantasm, it rules. Not again. I was always kind of aware of this movie, but maybe it's the title. Like, I didn't have any kind of visual association with this film. I went into this blind, but I think maybe as a child, like, Phantasm's kind of generic, you know? I didn't know what to expect. I was almost thinking like a poltergeist kind of thing.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything really quite like it. Which is, I mean, I don't know. If you break the mold with your creation, you did all right.
But I guess just hopping right into the movie, I mean, it really centers around these.
Before we get off of like background information, one reported factoid is that Motorhead's Ace of Spades is based off of this film, specifically Mike, and the shape of his hair.
That looks like an Ace of Spades.
Because it looks like an Ace of Spades.
Dude, that song is one of the most badass songs ever written and recorded. Motorhead's Ace of Spades.
It really is.
I cannot think of a more badass song.
So, I really want to believe in my heart of hearts that it was based off of this movie. Because that would just, magnify the lore.
That magnifies it by quite a bit.
Indeed.
So the film really centers around these two brothers. The younger one is named Mike, who's 13, played by Michael Baldwin. So
he's the one with the penis head haircut.
Yep, the Ace of Spades. Yep. His brother, Jody, played by Bill Thornbury, is quite a bit older. I would say he's like in his 20s or something. And their parents have died recently. So essentially, like, Jody's been out on the road having adventures. It's the 70s. We're listening to that Alice Cooper. I don't know.
You could hop on a stranger's car and travel across the country, and like it wasn't the craziest thing that anyone in your town did that year.
Back when we were free. To have long hair.
Yeah. Cue Freebird.
Back when you never had to look at another dude's ears.
That's You'd have had to have looked at mine. It's my one bald joke for this episode.
Hey, you could pull off a Reggie. So Reggie is their buddy who has the sick ponytail, and this man, he's it's. I have a lot of respect for the bald man who lets the horseshoe grow into a long pony. Like that's.
It's a display of dominance.
It is
a lack of fear.
It's a display of something. It's a display of something.
You're right. You're right. Is it a display of dominance and bravery, or is it a display of
alcoholism?
Yeah, that's. I was going to be nicer and say giving up, but yeah,
giving up. Yeah. I mean, it's. I mean that I just love that freaking, and it's in a ponytail, by the way, so it's like a mullet.
A skullet. Skullet.
Is that what they call it? A skullet?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a skullet rat tail looking thing. It's amazing. The second this guy shows up, I was like, this guy's gonna be the life of the party. For sure.
And he kind of is out the gate. He shows up.
No, he is, and he drives an ice cream truck.
Yep. So
that's Reggie. He was friends with Coscarelli. And he's played by Reggie Bannister. So that's easy. His character's named Reggie.
There's a lot of that in this movie.
He's the loyal friend, everyman, comic relief. Main protagonist in some of the later films, you might say.
Yeah, I really like the guitar scene with Jody and Reggie.
Yeah, that was good. They have a little jam session, which apparently that actor who plays Jody wrote that song, which it's quite good. It's in like a country rock, like kind of a New Riders of the Purple Sage style almost.
Or Flying Burrito Brothers, perhaps.
Or if you want to get shittier in that kind of same vein, the Eagles.
Yeah, if you want. My mom got me like a Time, the Eagles edition or whatever, and which I mean, I appreciate it because she knows I like classic rock. She's trying to bridge the gap.
She's trying.
She is, but little did she know, and I feel like it just came out of my mouth immediately. I was like, man, I fucking hate the Eagles, and she was like, I like some of their songs. All dejected, and I felt like an asshole.
That's not what you're supposed to say, even if that's what you're feeling.
You're right. That was
but still, now moment. That is in your house, and when I saw it, I remember being like, "Why do you have this?"
Yeah.
Who are you?
The Eagles have some good songs. To be fair to them,
maybe like their first album.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had this discussion, but "Witchy Woman's" fine.
"Witchy Woman" is fine. It's a damn fine song.
And as we've also talked about on a previous episode, the Eagles' Greatest Hits, the best-selling album of all time.
Which still blows my mind that it pushed Thriller out.
I know. We had to do a quick fact check live on the podcast.
I know, it broke my heart.
Prove Andrew wrong.
Yep, that's
broke my heart to be
wrong. It really does. It stings immeasurably.
Yep. So anyway, this movie starts off with a pretty absurd premise. This character, Tommy, is having sex with this woman in the cemetery, Morningside Cemetery, and she stabs him.
Yeah, we get some boob right out the gate.
Yep.
Great boobs.
Yep.
The woman is, just for reference for the rest of us talking about this, is the lady in lavender.
The lady in lavender, and it is important to note, those were not her tits. They were stand-in. It was a
stand-in boobs.
I feel like that's an important detail.
I feel like if you do like a cut shot where it's just the chest and there's no face, like you just assume...
It's always is.
It's a stand-in set of boobs.
I mean, if I was going to act in a film and I had to show my dick... Definitely getting a stand-in.
Oh my gosh.
Moving on.
Yeah. It just cuts over and it's these super chiseled thighs and this
muscle Squidward or whatever. Beautiful.
Exactly.
Oh my god.
They just bring in a horse. And
Yeah, they just bring a I don't know, man. People might be concerned if it just cuts to a horse's dick. They're gonna be like, "What disease is that?"
Interesting directorial decision. What disease is that?
So the two brothers, Mike, Jody, their friend Reggie, they're all at the funeral for this guy Tommy who got stabbed after. And I think that Jody and Tommy and Reggie were all in a band together, maybe.
Okay, I'll bite.
But actually I misspoke. Mike is not at the funeral, but he is kind of like hiding and peeking and watching it. He's
he's there, but he's like not.
He's not supposed to be.
He's not supposed to be. There we go.
And then after the funeral, he watches the Undertaker lift up the casket and put it back in the hearse and drive away, which strikes him as odd. Also, not to mention, it had taken like 5 dudes to carry this casket an hour prior.
Yeah, if you, the listener, didn't know, caskets with bodies in them weigh hundreds of pounds.
If you've never had the fortune of carrying a casket yet.
Hey, being a pallbearer is a great honor.
It is.
I don't know if I'd call it fortunate, but...
My grandmother donated her body to science, and I think they paid her out like a paycheck of like $75 or whatever.
That's not very much.
But it's just free cash.
That you're not going to spend.
No, you get it now. You signed the contract.
I see.
So it's free money. Would you consider something like that?
No. Probably not for me.
I mean, they make it sound like your body's going to have like some great contribution, but I'm sure there's lots of times where they just have too many bodies and they're just like, all right, just throw it in the mass grave.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Or they're just let's see what happens when one is just covered in human feces and just left to rot. How long does it take?
For science. Yeah. Get the dog food fucking grinder out and turn you into Fido's next meal. Dude, no.
Let's see what happens if we human centipede this one with another cadaver.
I wasn't gonna say like this is exactly how your corpse ends up in one of those bodies, like, you know, exhibits.
That'd be cool. That I'm down with, dude.
Some splayed out nervous system.
Dude, I'd be fully on board with that. I feel like the reality is most of those bodies for science go to much darker, they're like, let's inject this flesh-eating bacteria into its face and see what happens.
Dude, with my luck, I would just end up in a morgue where some dude pimps the corpses out to perverts.
I like our wait, what?
Do you? What?
I like our morticians. I like them. I do feel like there's a little bit of that Foot Locker kind of like stigma on them. Like maybe they're into it.
And the Foot Locker stigma, if you guys haven't heard us talk about it before, is that men or women, people who work at Foot Locker like feet. And
you know, if you want to be an edgelord, mortician's a pretty cool job. Or gravedigger. I mean, I'd put that on my resume.
I really thought that I would have hooked up with, like, some big titty goth mortician by now in life, but it's just...
Elvira or something?
Yeah, she left a big impression on me as a young man.
She's the ultimate big titty goth.
Just haven't had that ball come across my plate yet.
You're not hanging out at the right places, you know?
It's a baseball reference because baseball's big right now.
So when's the last time you've been in a Hot Topic, Andrew?
I don't even know, man. I feel like it would have had to have been like early college.
I mean, if you want a big titty goth girlfriend, you got to go to them, bro.
I just don't know if big titty goth chicks are into middle-aged Viking men. You know, like.
If you're listening to a big titty goth girl, let us know.
Not in a weird way.
Send feet, okay?
That's. Don't do that. Like, if you're going to send anything, don't send feet.
Send bobs. Show foot fingers.
Foot fingers.
Anyway, going back to this
so fucking derailed.
Stupid, insane movie. Next, Mike goes to a fortune teller. And I love this scene because it's just such a direct, overt homage to Dune.
Overt. When I was watching it, I was just like, this is...
It's almost just theft.
It is almost just theft.
It's almost like they just stole that whole scene, and it has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. It's
nothing at all.
Literally
nothing
just like Coscarelli was like, I like Dune. Let's have a Dune part.
Yeah, fear is the mind killer time.
But he goes to a fortune teller. She makes him put your hand in the box. Puts his fucking hand in the box. Of course, it's just a pain box. She doesn't say fear is the mind killer. She said fear is a killer.
Yes.
It's so close. It's so close. And that is just randomly like a theme of the movie, which I like that. It ties it all together. I think the whole film is about his existential angst and fear of death and facing his own mortality and the death of his whole fucking family, really. And at the end, it kind of comes full circle. He's like, don't be afraid, or whatever. But it's totally random and just like inserted haphazardly into this fucking movie.
But I loved it, being a Dune nerd.
I loved it, and I don't know. I wish I could tell you what like Coscarelli was trying to say by just stealing this scene directly out of Dune. Before the first Dune film adaptation, by the way. You know? This was
but not before the first attempted one.
Not before the first attempted one, I don't think.
Correct.
I'm trying to remember Jodorowsky's.
77.
Okay. Same era. But
I think it was 77.
It's just stolen directly from Dune. But it kicked ass. And then like they never really revisit that. Later on from this, Jody, the older brother, the cool older brother who plays guitar, who is a pretty badass dude. He's like picking up chicks at the bar or whatever, which I'm pretty sure that bar is also called Dune, which is another reference right there. So on the nose.
He loved Dune. A lot of people did. Dude, Dune was huge in like late 60s, 70s.
Yeah. I mean, because when it came out, there was nothing else like it, you know. Pre-Star Wars, now we have Game of Thrones, all these other mythologies. Back then you had Lord of the Rings and Dune, period.
That's it.
And I mean, you know, the other great sci-fi authors, but
there was actually a lot more, but those were like the ones that like early on.
Arguably the most complete fantasy worlds where they're like, nothing else is like Lord of the Rings where they're like, we have our own language, but Dune's pretty fucking close.
Languages.
Factually incorrect. It's languages.
Plural. I beat somebody in chess this weekend. And I
must have felt nice.
I felt like the king of the nerds. In fact, I loudly proclaimed it with my fists in the air. I'm the king of the nerds after I beat him in a party setting. I'm resisting the urge to talk about the current chess scandal.
Just say it. Yeah, I'm vaguely familiar. I don't know that I could name all the names, but there's Magnus Carlsen, right?
Yes,
he was the old champion who was recently beaten, and the guy who beat him was found to have a history of cheating.
So the running theory, yes, all that is correct. The running theory right now is that he was using a vibratory butt plug to have computer moves transmitted to him.
Love it.
Yeah, that's the timeline, man. The timeline is going to exciting new places.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
this season of reality's got a writer's strike going on. They're just pulling anything out at this point.
Yeah, because I guess the idea is that someone else could be on a computer using like an AI, basically, to tell him what is the perfect move in this situation, like a supercomputer or whatever, correct. Or an iPhone or whatever fuck they use now.
So like that style of cheating was rampant when I was playing Yahoo Chess as a kid. So people would play as like the black pieces, and they would essentially flip a board against an AI. So they would make the moves that their opponent on Yahoo Chess was making, and then take whatever the computer's response was and make that move in Yahoo Chess themselves.
Right. That's pretty fascinating. What's the guy's name who's the cheater?
Oh, I don't even fucking remember.
But
I'm not that into chess. I'm just more fixated on the fact that he had a fucking vibrating,
I think
a remote controlled vibrating ass plug.
You know, that's the hook of that story for sure.
It's definitely the hook of that. It wasn't chess.
He's like, checkmate! Like right as it comes.
That would be a much more hilarious outcome, as if they had played the whole game, and as he was moving in for the coup de grace to finish him off, he just absolutely climaxes in the biggest prostate orgasm of all time.
What is this? This is like the biggest chess tournament in the world, right?
I have no idea, dude. Again,
it's some big fucking deal, though.
I can only remember so much, and the butt plug is what I chose to remember out of that story.
So anyway, going back to this crazy movie, as I said before, we got this weird, creepy Undertaker, the tall man, as we will later learn to know of him as. Mike kind of like goes to the mausoleum where they're holding all these bodies to investigate because he's a kid and he's just looking for adventure, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's there, immediately there's something weird going on. I think it's worth mentioning the mausoleum. I know you said they used like a real morgue for one of the scenes.
Correct, but not the mausoleum.
Okay, so the mausoleum, they show a mansion when they're outside of it, but on the inside, super cool looking. It's like this marble, marble hallways that are like labyrinthian, and it's kind of, there is no logic to like this physical space. And it reminds me of the Red Room from Twin Peaks a lot. It's almost like when you're in here, you're in dream world. You're outside of the normal physical universe. Like the rules don't apply here. Would you say that's accurate?
I would.
There's something strange. It's almost like you're going into another dimension every time you go into this mausoleum.
And it does have a very similar feel as the Red Room.
Which I think Eraserhead, worth mentioning, came out around, I think that was 1977. So it kind of came out. A lot of things were all kind of simultaneously happening at this time. You know, Star Wars, Eraserhead, two things that kind of tie into this a little bit. But I think at that time, you know, this kind of dream logic in movies was more of a novel concept. Interestingly, that mausoleum is just such a set piece of the film. It's almost like its own character. Like, it's just adds so much to the vibe. It looks so nice. It looks like that's the most expensive part of the film in many ways. Apparently, it was actually constructed out of plywood and marble-colored plastic wallpaper.
Yeah, but it looks very convincing.
Looks very nice. And so when Mike sneaks in here the first time, some guy tries to like grab him or whatever, a worker. This is the first time we are introduced to this metal sphere, which is such like a hallmark of this film. But it's like this sphere with like this jagged knives coming out of the front. and it like flies through the air like a Quidditch ball or something.
Like a Quidditch ball of death.
Yeah, and it's coming right for this kid, and he like gets away at the last minute, and it goes into the caretaker's head behind him, and this is the best kill in the movie, and it's so good. Like, it digs into this dude's head. Drills into his head, I should say.
With a little penis drill.
And it has a hole on the other side, and then blood just shoots out of the hole. It's hard to describe. It looks super cool. For me, this part, every part, this whole scene reminded me so much of kung fu movies and like samurai movies. Very kind of Shogun Assassin-ish. When like he's holding that ball in his head and it's just shooting out like gallons of blood or whatever.
Yeah, it's like in Shogun Assassin in like the kind of like final big open field battle. He puts the sword in the middle of the dude's head and he like catches it or whatever, but it still gives us a good gush eventually.
This is ridiculous. But yes, also, you know, that's the kind of flying weapon thing is a trope in kung fu movies, you know? I don't know if you've ever seen The Master of the Flying Guillotine, but it's the same fucking idea. They have like, you know, it's a weapon that flies around and kills you.
It also is very reminiscent of like the torture droid from Star Wars. It's the one that like they bring into the room with Princess Leia. It's like we have ways of making you talk, and the droid comes in, it's floating all menacingly. You know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't know why I don't remember that part. I don't remember that. I just can't picture the robot.
It looks pretty similar.
Was it CGI later, or was this the original?
It's the original.
Well, you don't want this to happen to you. Apparently, that device was made by craftsman Willard Green, who charged only $1,100 for all of his services, and he died before the film was released.
Which is a bummer because this thing is so cool.
I think that this, again, all I was thinking is kung fu movies, and I think that adds so much to this. Just that one weird little flying ball. It's just such a quirk, you know, and a feature of this film, and it's featured in every film, subsequent film. Apparently, the special effects, so they're all so simple and the budget's so low on this, right? But they had baseball pitchers throw the ball as hard as they could and then played it in reverse. So, you know, very simple but effective.
Yeah, another Star Wars call out. Just because we're talking about
there's going to be more Star Wars call-outs.
Well, all right, cool. So we're already breaking into some Star Wars. Like the Force jump effect, you know, where like Luke jumps up, you know, substantially more. That was filmed by somebody jumping down and then being played in reverse.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it's tried and true film technique.
Yep.
I mean, just jumping, we don't need to go through this movie beat by beat because the chronology doesn't matter that much, but kind of going into who this tall man is, we learn that he's taking these recently deceased bodies and turning them into his dwarf zombie slaves, where he is literally, they don't explain it, he's the tall man, he wants to make these zombies short.
That's
using
where
gravity somehow.
This sort of like blends into the sci-fi realm because it's like, is this dude an alien? You know, he's sending his little zombie minions to another planet to be his slaves. Is he? I mean, to me, he's all of it. He's all of it rolled into one.
Dude, it's so far out. This movie gets so far. So we already talked about how Reggie and Jody were jamming earlier on guitars.
Yep.
Well, Reggie pulls out a tuning fork. And this is important and plays a role in the whole franchise. But when he tunes this tuning fork, you know, it's like a piece of metal and you hit it and it rings out at a certain frequency and note. We learn that, inside this mausoleum, there's like a giant tuning fork. And this whole room that it's in resonates at the same frequency. And if you go in between this giant tuning fork in the mausoleum, it actually transports you into this other dimension. So the tall man is an interdimensional being. And when Mike is in the mausoleum and looks through the portal, essentially, he sees a red planet where all of the zombie slaves are essentially lining up. They're not doing much there. But the zombie slaves are used by the tall man throughout the film to kind of terrorize and attack our protagonists. And they look exactly like Jawas.
They do look exactly like Jawas.
We have to say that. And apparently, Star Wars was released after like all these. So all this happened in the same era. When Star Wars was released, they were all like, "Fuck, those Jawas look exactly like our little dudes. Like, what should we do?" But it was just too late. It was just too late.
They discussed changing the rope color to try and make them more distinct from which would have.
It's not enough. It's not.
Maybe helped.
I mean,
but
yeah.
It would have cost too much. They just went with the brown.
They're just Jawas.
Yeah, they're Jawas.
They are fucking Jawas. But anyway, the tall man tries to get Mike. He slams the tall man's hand in a door, and like weird orange goo shoots out.
Ichor.
Is it like embalming fluid, or what was that? It's just goo?
Yeah, it's orange goo.
So anyway, Mike, for some inexplicable reason, steals the finger, uses that as evidence to prove to everyone of the tall man's existence. The finger is still wiggling around. And all sorts of just shenanigans. If this already sounds like it's gone off the rails, like there's more. So then Jody, who's the older brother, he's hooking up with this chick that he met at the bar, the Dune bar. Which I'd hang out at the Dune bar, obviously.
All day, yeah.
So he picks up this hottie from the Dune bar. Turns out to be the lady in lavender. And, of course, after he's fucking her, she turns into the tall man. So he's just turning into this lady and seducing guys. And that's his whole deal.
That's one of his powers.
That's one of his powers. Yeah, and then, like, some more shit happens. Like, the tall man can, like, I guess control things with his mind because this vehicle without a driver like chases Mike and Jody. Remember that scene? And then at one point they find like the ice cream truck's turned over and they just assume that Reggie's dead and then he just appears later.
So the hearse looked like no one was in it because one of the Jawas was driving it.
Oh, I see.
So he wasn't.
Damn Jawas.
Those damn Jawas.
That's
hate speech.
At a certain point, and this is not really explained at all, but Jody, the older brother, just dies. They're just like, oh yeah, he died. Right? He dies. He dies in a car crash. And like at the end, he's gone. And I mean, Mike is really the main protagonist. This is, again, it's all an allegory about grieving and mourning the death. Because his parents had recently died. And now his brothers died. So, I mean, you could even ponder that he might be mourning the death of his brother as well with this whole fantasy.
So Jody makes it to the end of the original dream sequence.
Reggie tells him that Mike had a nightmare and Jody died in a car wreck and proposes a road trip. So yeah, it kind of comes full circle where it's like, was it a dream or was it not a dream? Is it a
Also, Reggie died in the dream. We skipped over that. Reggie got stabbed by the lady in lavender being a total simp, trying to help the hot babe out. Gets a knife in the gullet.
I mean, if it sounds unintelligible, it kind of all is. And later on in the franchise, we learn that it's not a dream, definitively. Like, it's an alternate universe. The tall man apparently was just a normal dude during the Civil War. And dude, it gets so crazy.
Also, the film ends with the tall man appearing in Mike's bedroom and then him getting pulled into a mirror. All right,
there's a jump scare end, which this movie was highly influential on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And there's I feel like every Freddy movie ends with a similar jump scare, and I think they've directly attributed it to the influence of this film.
So this is a granddaddy of horror. It's well shot too. Like, it might be an indie film, but it looks well. It's aged well, you know.
All things, it really has aged well. I think this one really holds up. Again, was shocked that I hadn't seen this. It's do yourself a favor and go watch it.
I think it's a top 25, if not even better for me.
It rules. And I like that it's weird, you know? Oh, by the way, on Peacock, where I watched this, and I don't have a subscription, they have a whole category of films called Far Out Flicks. And I'm thinking about suing them. That's new. We were first.
Dude, what the fuck? And they're going to have to cease and desist. All right. Well, anyways, listeners.
Anyway, thanks for joining us. As always, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Far Out Flicks Podcast.
Or you can petition Peacock on our behalf.
I don't care that you have The Office. That's all you've got.
I don't even like The Office anymore.
I love The Office.
I said it.
I still like it. I did not get into Parks and Rec, and I don't know why.
I actually like that one better.
He likes Park and Rec. I like The Office. It's wacky. It's crazy
wacky
and
here.
wild. All
Anyways,
right, Flickers. Thank you. Check out the Facebook, Far Out Flicks Podcast. Check out the Instagram. Subscribe. Leave a review. Leave a rating.
Share with a friend. Let us know if you are a big titty goth mortician or any kind. All right, that's it of this special Flickers. Halloween spooky season episode of Far Out Flicks.
Got another fun Halloween episode for you next week, and keep on flicking.